I'd like to thank you for taking some time out this morning to join us for our Celsius webinar on temperature mapping for compliance and control. My name is Patrick Gallagher and I'm the Customer Success Manager at Celsius, and I'm joined today with Rory Murphy, who is our Life Sciences Manager. Just before we begin our presentation today, we just want to cover a few housekeeping rules that we have in place. So your camera and mic are automatically off. If you have any problems hearing presenters or reviewing the presentation, check your device audio settings and network connection. You can submit questions during the webinar using the Q&A function, not the chat function. For some users, if Q&A is not available, please email your questions to marketing@celsius.com. These will be monitored live and we'll answer questions at the end of the webinar. And if you have any queries or comments after the webinar, email us at marketing@celsius.com. A recording of the presentation will be shared with everyone after the webinar also. And next slide there, Rory, please. So for today's webinar, we're going to, on screen there, you'll see an agenda. So we're going to cover an introduction, what is temperature mapping, why conduct it, the regulatory drivers and guidelines, and mapping as a component of qualification. And then Rory's going to talk about project steps, so the project scoping, the protocol design, project execution and data capture, data analysis and report document. And then we're going to cover off then with a summary, and we're going to do a Q&A session and display our context list as well after the webinar is over. So I'm just going to pass you now to Rory Murphy, and he is going to begin our webinar.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to our webinar on temperature mapping this morning. And we have a good bit of ground to cover, so I'll get straight into the content. It should run for about between 15 and 18 minutes, then we'll have time for some Q&A. So what is temperature mapping? Well, let's run through some definitions. Temperature mapping is a process used to measure and document the temperature distribution within a defined space over a defined period. Temperature mapping is used to demonstrate that a space, a piece of equipment, or a process maintains the temperature within the required limits, which is critical for temperature-sensitive products like pharmaceuticals, biologics, and vaccines. Examples of areas which may require temperature mapping include warehouses and storage areas, and also controlled environments and equipment such as cold rooms, refrigerators, freezers, and stability rooms. So how is temperature mapping conducted? Well, we're going to go into the more detailed look at the process a little bit later on, but in broad strokes, temperature mapping involves placing temperature sensors throughout the specified area or equipment in order to measure and record the temperature at multiple locations over a specified time frame. For large areas such as warehouses, the data collection phase may last for several days or weeks to capture temperatures across a range of conditions, different times of day, different shift patterns, weather conditions. For smaller and more controlled environments, such as fridges and freezers, the mapping period may be shorter as they are less likely to be influenced by external factors over time. Of course, if you had a cold room with an external wall, even though that's a controlled environment, you might want to conduct mappings at different times of year. So why do we conduct temperature mappings? Well, there's a number of different reasons. Regulatory compliance, of course, is a main one. Adherence to current good practices. Audit readiness. We want to be able to demonstrate compliance for regulatory body inspections. We conduct temperature mappings in support of operational and performance qualifications of equipment and facilities. Risk management. We want to be able to identify warm or cool areas that could compromise product quality. Product safety and integrity. We want to verify that medicines and vaccines are being stored at the correct temperatures. And for operational efficiency reasons, we can maybe reduce energy consumption by optimizing our equipment performance. So there are a number of relevant organizations that have developed guidelines which drive requirements and inform best practices, including, but not limited to, the European Union, the International Society for Pharmaceutical Engineering, the US Pharmacopoeia, and the World Health Organization. Now I'm going to zoom in on the WHO documentation. If you don't already know, it's freely available to download from the WHO website, and I would encourage you to go in and download the documents. They're a great resource, and they have some really nicely laid out content with clear methodologies outlined. So specifically, it's the Technical Report Series 961, the Expert Committee on Specifications for Pharmaceutical Preparations. Within that, you have Annex 9, which is the model guidance for the storage and transport of time and temperature sensitive pharmaceutical products. And within that, there are supplements 6, 7, and 8. 6 deals with temperature and humidity monitoring systems. 7 talks about the qualification of temperature controlled storage areas. And supplement 8, specifically temperature mapping of storage areas. Now, the word qualification has come up a couple of times already. So I'm just going to jump into a little bit of a deeper dive on that. So qualification is the action of proving that any premises, systems, and items of equipment work correctly and actually lead to the expected results. Validation is the action of proving, in accordance with the principles of good practice, quality guidelines and regulations, that any procedure, process, equipment, material, activity, or system actually and consistently leads to the expected results. So qualification verifies that equipment, systems, and facilities meet their design specifications, whereas validation verifies that a process consistently produces a product meeting its predetermined specifications and quality attributes. In essence, qualification is a subset of validation. Equipment and systems are qualified first to ensure they're suitable for intended use, and then the processes that use that qualified equipment are validated to ensure consistent results. There are a number of different stages of qualification. Design qualification typically takes place at the manufacturer. So if we take the example of a freezer, the design qualification is going to take place at the manufacturer's premises in tightly controlled conditions. Then there will be an installation qualification. So you order the fridge gets delivered. An installation qualification takes place to test it in situation. Then you would conduct an operational qualification under controlled conditions. We'll talk about this in a moment. And after the operational qualification, there will be a performance qualification to check the performance in normal operating conditions. So temperature mapping typically forms a part of operational qualification and performance qualification. So let's look at that. So temperature mapping as part of operational qualification. It's carried out in controlled conditions, typically on new equipment or installations, to verify that the equipment or facility can maintain the required conditions. Operational qualification mapping is conducted on new equipment after the installation qualification has been completed. It's carried out prior to the commencement of commercial use, and it's conducted with no product present. This is often referred to as an empty state or an unloaded mapping. So then once your operational qualification has been conducted, a performance qualification is carried out in normal operating conditions. So performance qualification is conducted with product or maybe simulated product in place. This is referred to as a loaded state or full state mapping. Seasonal performance qualifications are carried out to capture conditions when the external ambient temperatures are at their extremes. So these are referred to as summer and winter mappings. Now, this may not be relevant if it's a fridge or a freezer, but it certainly would be relevant for things like warehouses and storage areas. Periodic requalifications are conducted to demonstrate ongoing compliance. And you also have event-driven requalifications. So they may be triggered by things like a facility layout modification, new equipment installation, equipment repair. So you may want to requalify a piece of equipment after it's had work carried out on it. Temperature excursions. So if you've had a temperature excursion or recurring temperature excursions, you may need to carry out a mapping as part of your root cause analysis and your corrective action. And finally, new product requirements. So maybe you're storing a product that you haven't previously stored and it has a different temperature specification. You may need to carry out a requalification in order to assure that you can store that safely. Okay, so the temperature mapping project steps, if we look at them, I've broken them out into kind of 5 steps. So typically you'll have a project scoping, you'll have the protocol design, you'll have the protocol execution, you'll have the data analysis and the report document. So we'll step through these in a little bit more detail. So for project scoping, what we're doing is we're determining the project requirements. We're looking at temperature specifications and what the deliverables are. So if we imagine that this is a warehouse qualification mapping that we're conducting, we will conduct a site survey in order to determine the sensor positions based on the layout and based on a risk assessment. So we look at things like doors and windows, skylights. We look at sources of heat or cold. So there may be equipment in there that generates warm air or cold air airflows, such as HVAC air intakes or outlet vents. And so we'll determine where we're going to position our sensors within the product storage space in order to be able to capture the profile. After the project scoping, we move into the protocol design phase. So we're going to create a protocol document which is going to outline the project scope and the deliverables. It'll outline the methodology. We will select the appropriate equipment that's going to be used in terms of temperature sensors or data loggers. We're going to define the areas that are going to be mapped. We'll create the sensor placement diagrams and the rationale. And we'll detail the tests and the duration of the tests that are going to take place. So one of the things that is part of a typical mapping is stress testing, and that's typically something like power failure simulation. So measuring how long the space remains within specification. In the event of a power failure, how long does it take to get back up to temperature? And also door open events are a common form of stress testing that's conducted during mappings. Once the protocol document is created, it's going to then be approved by the mapping team prior to execution. So the protocol execution and data capture phase, that's where the sensor deployment will take place. So the equipment is installed according to the placement diagram agreed in the protocol. And then once the sensors are deployed and tested and verified, then we commence the data capture. So we're going to document the mapping start time, the mapping end time, and we're going to execute and document the details of the additional tests, such as the power failure simulation or door open tests. We may also use activity logs to document any events of note that occurred during the data capture. So for example, if it's a performance qualification and we're wanting to capture real life scenarios, maybe the door of the freezer is going to be opened and closed over the course of the mapping. So we may put an activity log there just so that operators can note when doors were opened and doors were closed, so that we can then correlate that with the data that we've collected during the mapping. Then once the data capture has been completed, we're going to perform an analysis of the collected data. So we're assessing variability across the mapped area. We're determining the profile of the temperature at the high risk areas that we've identified, if there were any. We're going to identify the warmest and coolest locations. And we're going to take a look at trends and see if there are patterns over time. So there may be daily patterns, weekly cycles, seasonal effects, that type of thing. Then once the data analysis is complete, we're going to create a report document. So the mapping report is going to include an overview of the scope and objectives. It'll contain the results summary of the different tests that we've carried out, along with minimum, maximum, average temperatures, warmest and coolest locations. And then there may be some conclusions and recommendations to include. Perhaps there's corrective actions required. Maybe the mapping has demonstrated that we have an area that's out of spec or something. So corrective actions may be required. Further mapping may be required afterwards. So that completes the project execution steps. We'll just go through a quick summary now. So what is temperature mapping? It's a process used to measure and document the temperature distribution within a defined space over a defined period. It's conducted by placing calibrated sensors throughout the usable product area. It's driven typically by regulatory requirements as part of risk assessment and forms part of qualification and validation processes. Periodic requalifications may be required to demonstrate continued compliance. Event-driven requalifications may be triggered. And a protocol document is prepared before the mapping and a mapping report prepared afterwards. And after all of that, I'm going to hand over to Teresa, who will hopefully have collected some questions through the Q&A or through email.
We have indeed. Hi everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I know it's a commitment to join our session, so we really appreciate it, and we've had good numbers this morning, so we're very grateful. And thanks, Rory, for going through that. There was a lot to get through in the time that we have, so thanks for covering everything comprehensively. And another thank you to the questions that we got in. Yes, we have a few questions so far. We are very fortunate that we have Rory and Patrick on the team here in Celsius. They've a really good in-depth knowledge of what you need to consider and the steps you need to take and go through if you want to carry out a good, rigorous, or if you have a temperature monitoring project that you need to consider or underway soon. So what I would say is, we still have a little bit of time. If you want to still submit questions here, as I've been posting, you can post them on the Q&A, or you can email them to marketing@celsius.com. But I would say Rory and Patrick are very happy to receive questions afterwards as well. So if you think of something afterwards, or even later in the week or whenever, we're very happy to take questions and get back to you at any stage if you have anything at all that you want to ask about, the qualification process, the documentation, or any of the resources that Rory talked about today. I know we'll share Rory's contact details at the end of the slides, when we finish up here today, but you can also email marketing@celsius.com, or if you're a client, obviously you can contact any of your account managers. So yes, I will jump into the questions. We have a few, Rory. I will go to first question we got, and this one is, I have a -80 freezer. How often should temperature mapping be conducted on it?
Teresa, yep. So -80 freezer, or a ULT, an ultra low temperature freezer. I'm assuming that operational qualification and performance qualification have already taken place on it. So in terms of like periodic requalifications, the WHO recommendation is that you qualify every 2 years at least. Many companies or organizations will have an annual recalibration policy in place. But certainly you'd want to be requalifying to be in compliance with the WHO guidelines at least every 2 years.
Great, thanks for that, Rory. A question that has come in from, I think it's Jared, is qualification the same as verification?
Yeah, qualification is a form of verification. So yeah, I think we can say that. Yeah.
Right, that's a nice easy answer. And if you need anything else, Jared, on that, again, feel free to contact us afterwards if you want to probe
Yeah,
a bit more on
absolutely.
it.
Drop me a line. We can dig into it a little bit more.
Perfect. This one is from Anna. For temperature mapping of refrigerators, what is the recommended duration for the mapping exercise, please?
Say that again, sorry,
Sure.
Teresa.
From Anna, for temperature mapping of refrigerators, what is the recommended duration for the mapping exercise?
For a fridge, typically you'll map that for 24 or 48 hours would be a typical duration for a fridge mapping.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see. How often, this one from Helen, how often do you think, it might be a little bit similar to one of the first questions, but how often do you think mapping should be routinely performed on a large walk-in cold store?
Again, that would be the same as the answer to the first question. So for a ULT freezer, a cold room, the recommendation is not longer than 2 years between mappings. A lot of people will map annually.
Okay, thank you for that. A couple more questions. Let's see. From Yvonne. Now, I hope I'm going to read this right, Yvonne, so bear with me, Rory. Will this temperature profiling be ISO 17025C accredited by INAB?
So we can, if it's Celsius that's carrying out the mapping, yeah, we offer 17025 calibration certificates with our sensors. So the sensors would be ISO 17025 accredited.
And that applies, that's through us, through Celsius.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Another question's come in. How many sensors should be used to map a walk-in cold room? I don't have any details on the size or number of them, but maybe you could give us an indication.
Yeah, it's a good question and one that comes up frequently. So for a small walk-in, say 20 cubic meters, you would typically use between 9 and 15 sensors for mapping that. If it's a bigger, maybe like a 50 or 60 cubic meter, you'd probably go with between 15 and 25 sensors. And if you take a look at the WHO supplement 8, I think it is, there's a section on that gives some examples of sizes and talks about the spacing between sensors. There's a diagram in there of a cold room, and it shows a recommended placement pattern for that room. So yeah, I'd definitely go to the WHO website and have a look on that.
what we might do, and I know we're going to share the recording with everybody before the end of the week, and anybody who's registered for this webinar today. So what we might do is, if there's links, like hyperlinks that we could include, and that might be useful, Rory, that we can include it with the communication when we're sending that out to everyone. Okay, I have, let's see, another question. I don't know if it's something we can answer. It's regarding a service for -80 freezer. This is from Alison. Hi, is the temperature mapping carried out as part of standard service on a -80 freezer? They currently have a yearly service.
Okay, so if I'm understanding the question correctly, we're being asked if we carry out a temperature mapping as part of the annual service fee for. I'm assuming that we're already monitoring this this freezer.
Yeah,
the answer will be.
I was just going to say, if
the
Alison
answer
wants
will
to
be
send a
no,
follow-up to confirm it's regarding Celsius, but sorry, go ahead, Rory.
Yeah. I suppose I'm working off the assumption that it's an existing customer that has a monitoring system from us. The temperature mapping wouldn't be included. That would be an additional service. But yeah, we'd be happy to talk about that and let you know what our offering is on that.
Okay, great. And as I said, sorry to interrupt, Rory. Yeah, if Alison wants to send a follow-up on that, again, maybe we mightn't have time today, but again, we'll have our contact details at the end here, or you can email marketing@celsius.com. Another one, this one is from Alan. Thanks, Alan, for the question. Is there a retention period document available for how long to keep temperature records for fridges and freezers in hospital settings? So is there a retention period document available?
There may well be, but it's not something that I've come across before. But I will do a bit of research into that and come back to you, Alan.
Great, thanks, Rory. Yeah, we can follow that up with you, Alan. We have your details. And yes, Alison, thank you. Alison, you got back to confirm, yes, it was Celsius that service is with. So thanks for confirming that. Here's an interesting question from Helen. We still have a couple of minutes left for a couple more questions. Thanks again, Helen, for the question. With large cold stores, should sensors be placed at the same height or various heights?
For temperature mapping, they should be placed at different heights. So an important thing to remember is that when we're talking about mapping here, we're talking about identifying we're trying to identify kind of the worst case scenarios, the worst places within the storage area. So typically we will place sensors at the corners. If it's above 3.6 meters, I think it's recommended that you have 3 levels of sensors. So one at say floor level or just above, one in the middle, and one up at the top of the usable product area. So yeah, certainly multiple levels. If you're talking about continuous monitoring, where you've completed your mapping and now you have your monitoring system in place, well, you're typically going to put your continuous monitoring sensors in the worst case scenarios that were discovered during your mapping, because you want to monitor for the worst case. So that sensor, could be, depending on the size of the cold storage area, you may need one or more sensors for continuous monitoring, and they could be at different levels.
Okay. Gotcha. Thanks for that, Rory. I have one more comment and one more question to get through. I think that'll be the end of the time that we have, because we want to keep our time promised to everybody on the webinar. We're finishing up at 11:30. So again, thank you to everybody who submitted questions and for joining us today out of your busy days. Leslie, you put in a comment. NHS codes of practice has retention periods. So thank you for adding that. And the last question I'm going to ask is from Hugh. Thank you, Hugh. Are there any recommendations regarding mapping transport bags or containers for moving consumables across sites?
An interesting question. Um, I know it's not something that I've come across myself, but I would suggest that the WHO, I think it's supplements 9 through to 15, talk specifically about uh, mapping and qualification of product in transit. And I'd say there's probably some interesting information and guidelines in there that you could look at. Happy to take that offline as well if you wanted to email me directly, and we can take a look at it together.
Okay, we might do that. Yeah, again, we have your contact details here. Thanks again for the question. I'm going to wrap it up there in the Q&A. Sorry, we are about to go over time. So thanks to everybody again for joining us, and thanks for the questions. Patrick, I will hand over to you to wrap up.
Brilliant. Thanks, Teresa and Rory. So I'd just like to thank everyone for taking some time out to join today's webinar. Some really good questions on there, and I hope that the session was helpful for you all. And on screen, we've displayed Rory's email address and our own Celsius contacts as well. So please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you on our future webinars that we've planned. Thanks, everybody. All the best.